From the KPAO studio in Omaha, it's Go Vote Omaha, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. I'm Geri, a League member and your host. Each week we talk about issues that are important for elections. We hope to inspire you to talk about those same issues. And most important, when election time comes around, we want you to be ready and willing to go vote. This evening we'll be talking about the unicameral and proposed legislation, and we have a special guest in the studio with us to take your questions and answer the questions. She's the immediate past president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha and our highly unpaid lobbyist and advocate, Peggy Adair. Welcome, Peggy.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here this
happy
evening.
To be here.
Great. Well, while we're waiting for people to call in with their questions, and the number is on your screen, they can call in and you'll answer their questions.
Absolutely.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be with the League of Women Voters?
Sure. I worked for a nonprofit, Voices for Children in Nebraska, and I was their juvenile justice consultant, and a friend of mine came to me and wanted to know if I had some information about the juvenile justice statistics in Douglas County. And I said, well, that's what I do. Of course I do. And so I said, well, what are you wanting this information for? And she said she was a League of Women Voters member, and they were doing a study on juvenile justice in Douglas County. And I knew very little about the League. All I thought that they did was register voters, and I had no idea that they actually do studies, they actually look at issues, and they take action. And so that kind of piqued my interest. Then I went to a meeting, and the meeting was about water, which I thought was going to be incredibly boring. But it turned out to be so interesting and so fascinating. Not only the subject matter, it was very well done, but the people that were there were diverse in age and gender and ethnicity, and they were so smart and so active. And I thought, this is something I want to be a part of. And so that's why I joined.
Great. Okay. And how did you come to be the lobbyist for the League? We want to remind people that you're an unpaid lobbyist.
Absolutely. Well, I actually was a lobbyist for Voices for Children, and at that time. And so when I joined the League, I offered to be a lobbyist for the League as well. So I have been a lobbyist since 1988. Okay.
Let's start out talking a little bit about the unicameral. This is the second year of a session, 60-day session. Do you want to explain that a little bit, what that means, the second year and 60 days and all that?
They have a 2-year session. It's one session over 2 years. So the first year is 90 days long, 90 business days long, and that's the session where they set the budget. So that takes a lot of time in that first session, and they also set the rules and decide who sits on what committee and things like that. So it's a longer session. Then this second year of the session is just a 60-day session, and they still have to go over the budget. They still have to work on taxes and those things like that in a shorter amount of time. So it's really intense. A lot of things happen in a short amount of time.
Okay. So why don't you tell our viewers how a bill becomes law in Nebraska, in our unicameral?
Okay, kind of a quick and dirty.
Quick and dirty.
Somebody comes up with an idea, whether it's the senator who comes up with an idea, or a constituent, or a lobbyist, or an interest group. Somebody comes up with an idea and says there ought to be a law, and they will take that to the senator, and they will say, would you be willing, to take this law, or take this bill to the floor for us? And so they draft the bill, the senator will draft the bill, and then every bill in the legislature goes to a public hearing, and that's something that doesn't happen in a lot of the other states. So if a bill is introduced, it will receive a public hearing, and what that means is anybody can come and speak for or against that bill. You do not have to be a lobbyist. You can just be somebody who's interested in that piece of legislation, and you can come and state your piece and let them know how you feel about a certain piece of legislation.
And that's always in a committee. Bills get sent to particular committees?
Yes,
okay.
Depending on the subject matter of the bill. So they will, like education bills will get sent to the education committee. So then the committee decides whether or not they are going to send the bill to the full floor for debate. And if that happens, then the bill is debated on the floor, more than likely. At first it goes to what's called general file, and then if it moves beyond that, it goes to what's called select file. If it moves beyond that, then it goes to final reading. And then
Okay.
it becomes law if the governor signs it. If the governor chooses to veto that bill, then it will go back to the legislature, and they have to decide whether or not they have enough votes to override the governor's veto.
And we had that happen last year. We had
On
three overrides.
Yes, we
Yeah.
had 3 different
Okay.
bills, yes.
Okay. And so really what you're saying is, can I write a bill and take it to my senator and hope that it gets introduced?
You certainly can. I mean, you really can. In Nebraska, they say that, the citizens are the second house. If you can, get your point of view across and say, we really need this, and you can convince your state senator, and usually you're going to want to go to your own senator because they're more willing to talk to their own constituents and help their own constituents out. But if not, there's sometimes another senator who's really passionate about your concerns. For instance, is Senator Tommy Garrett, who's from the Bellevue area, is very interested in medical marijuana because a lot of parents have come to him with concerns and needs for their children that might have epilepsy, or they're having seizures, and they've tried everything else in the world, and they have heard that this might help their children. And so he really has a passion for that, and so he's working on that piece of legislation.
Okay. And how many bills typically are introduced every year?
In the long session last year, there were about 650 bills introduced. In the short session this year, about 450 bills.
And every one of them will get a hearing in
Yes.
committee? Wow, okay.
Yes.
So it must have to move along quickly because they started meeting January 5th and they end mid-April?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So let's, we'll talk a little bit about, you mentioned the bill that Senator Garrett had about medical marijuana. And is that bill being introduced again in this session?
No, the bills from the first session, if they're not killed, then they'll carry over into the second session. So that bill was in the hopper still, and I believe it made it to general file. And so it did have some floor debate, and so that it will continue on from general file and hopefully get debated again.
Okay.
The problem with this short session is, again, there's so many bills that unless a senator makes a bill a priority bill, it has less of a chance of making it. The other way that a bill can move through really quickly is if they on consent calendar, and those are basically bills that are non-controversial, that the committee has agreed. Like if there's 8 people on the committee and all 8 of them say, you know what, let's send this bill through, doesn't have any amendments to it. So those are put on consent calendar and they just kind of run through those bills, and those are able to pass pretty quickly.
Okay, okay. And let's see, how can a bill, if a person, you said it was in the hopper, for example, the medical marijuana bill. What does that mean when you say it's carried over and then it will just come up again for consideration in the second session?
The Speaker of the House has a lot of control over which bills go where.
Okay.
And the senators will come to him and say, I really think this bill has a really good chance of making it through. I have, support from 15 other senators. I have a lot of folks who are working on this bill. I have a lot of lobbyists that are working on this bill. And I really think it has a good chance of making it, and would you please, kind of move it to the top of the line? And sometimes you can get the speaker to do that for the bills.
Okay. Okay, and you said, and that first time it comes up, you said it's called general file, so it's kind of like other places would call it first reading of a bill, or?
Yes, I'm sure there's other terms for the same thing, yeah.
Okay.
It has to have 3 readings, and again, the general file is usually where the most discussion happens, and they can spend hours on bills. And then once they make it through general file, if there's some amendments or some changes they want to make to the bill, they'll do that between general file and select file. They'll work behind the scenes to do that. And then select file, they've usually straightened out a lot of those questions that they had on general file, so it's a little bit faster process. And then final reading is usually just very peremptory, and they actually have to read the whole bill, and so they will do that.
Oh, great, we have some questions coming, so this is really good. The first one here is, how do I find out what my legislative district is and who's my senator?
It's very easy to do that. The legislative website is really user-friendly. It's nebraskalegislature.gov. There's nebraskalegislature.gov.
Okay.
And On the home page, over on the left-hand side, it will say "Find your senator," and all you have to do is you just plug in your address, and it will tell you what legislative district you are in, and then it will actually give you a photo of your state senator and the name, and you can go to your state senator's web page right away from there. It's very easy.
Great. And most of them have like a newsletter you can sign up for, don't they, that give you information about what they're doing in their district? Or?
Yeah, different senators will spend more time or not on their web pages, and so some of them will have a lot of information there and some of them not so much, but each one of them does have that, and they do have basic information on their page. They'll have the bills that they've introduced, the committees that they sit on, their biography, and some just general information about them, and plus the legislative district, so you can see what part of the state that they represent.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, and then another question that came in, what's the best way to contact your senator, phone or email? And then there's a second part, is talking to a staffer just as good?
As far as how to contact them, it kind of depends on the senator. You kind of get to know them after a while. All of them, except for Senator Chambers, have email. Okay. He does not. He chooses not to do that. Email is probably the easiest way to contact them. If you're going to email them, I would suggest that you do it personally. In other words, a lot of times they have those mass emails where they say, sign up for this email and contact your senator. Mm-hmm. They usually dump those emails. They usually delete them and they don't look at them. Okay. They're more concerned with hearing from people personally, hearing their personal stories or their personal concerns. So email is a good way, phone call is a good way, but you're probably going to get a staffer. Okay. With the phone calls, and then just, you can call a staffer and make an appointment and go see them in person too. Okay.
And is it important when you do send an email or a message to let them know that you're a constituent of theirs in the district? Yeah.
Right up front. If you are, definitely right up front say, I'm your constituent and I have this concern, because they're more likely to listen to the concerns of their constituents than others.
Okay, and then if you're also in your subject lines, you should put something, if it's a specific bill and briefly what it's about that you're asking about, or giving an opinion.
And especially if you're in support of the bill, like if you want to put LB 895 in support, they're more likely to open that email up and look at it because they're looking for support for their particular legislation.
Okay, and we've heard legislators, senators keep track of the mail and messages they get from their district.
Yes, they will.
So it's important to contact.
It is. It's very important. Even if you just make a phone call and the staff answers it and you say, I'm in support of this bill, it really does make a difference.
Okay. Okay, we have a caller who called in and is concerned about something you mentioned before, which is clean water. What is the league position on LB 176 regarding hog confinement?
We actually haven't taken a position on that particular bill, but the league has a position concerning safe and clean water. So if we were to lobby, we would lobby in support of safe and clean water. Okay. And against hog confinement.
Hog confinement, right. And we want to mention that the League of Women Voters does take positions. We study issues and may take positions. We may support or oppose bills, and it would always be based on a study or position that we currently have. And if we don't take any action, it may be because we're just monitoring a bill, or we don't have anything that we've studied that we could use to make a determination of whether we support or oppose.
Right.
So, and we also never oppose political parties or candidates, so our viewers need to understand that as well. Right. So as you're lobbying, you're not lobbying on particular parties or people, you're lobbying on the issues.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let's see. Let's talk about one area. There's a couple bills. So the league develops a list of priority bills. Do you want to explain how that happens through the year and how we determine what we're going to be working on or looking for?
Sure. Well, again, there's a lot of bills that come forth, and because we're an all-volunteer organization, we only have so much woman power and man power and time. Right. And so we have to, among those 450 odd bills, we have to kind of pick the ones that we feel like are of a priority issue for the League of Women Voters. And so we have a committee the GO level, the Greater Omaha level. We also have a committee at the state level, and we look through some of the bills that people have talked to us about that they're interested in, and we make our selections on our priority bills from that.
Okay. And again, they're always based on us having some kind of study or position
Yes.
that we could use to advocate for that.
Yes, it has to be a position that either is by the League of Women Voters of the United States or the State League or the local league. And one issue that comes up from time to time, particularly in election years, is the fact that Nebraska chooses its congressional representatives and the President of the United States by district. In other words, we have what is it, 3 electoral votes, and one of those electoral votes actually went to President Obama because we had that selection of being able to go by district.
Right.
And from time to time, a bill comes before the legislature that says we want to be winner take all. The League of Women Voters could not oppose that because the League of Women Voters of the United States supports winner take all.
Okay.
So as individuals, league members could oppose legislation like that, but as a league, we couldn't because the LWVUS would have the opposite position.
Right. Okay. Okay, another caller question. Is there any legislation pending that's aimed at limiting voter registration or participation? Voter ID.
Yes, there is, and I don't know the particular numbers. I could look here, but there were a couple of bills that were left over from last year that did have to do with voter ID. They are not priorities. I don't think they're going to go anywhere. Those are bills that we oppose, but we're just kind of watching them, letting that sleeping dog lie. And then Senator Smith has a bill this year that he brought that in some instances you would have to have 2 forms of voter ID, so or identification in order to vote. So we will be opposing that one. That will
Right,
definitely be a
right.
priority to oppose that.
Oppose that. Now, you mentioned again the word priority in terms we have our priority bills, but explain to our viewers what it means when senators have priority bills, that they deem a bill their priority.
Okay.
How does that work?
Yeah, senators get 1 priority bill every session, and there's a deadline to when they will be able to pick their priority. This year the deadline is February 13th, and so they have to choose their priority by that time. The committees get 2 priority bills, and then the speaker can pick as many as he wants to. So the priority bills, again, because it is a short and fast session, then a senator will say, well, I really, really want this particular bill, and that's a priority, and so the Speaker of the House the Speaker of the Legislature will move that bill towards the top of the heap. A senator can also choose to support somebody else's bill as that senator's priority. And for instance, just lately, Senator Schnoor chose Senator Ebke's bill as his priority for this year. And that was the bill having to do with the registration of guns in cities like Omaha, where we have a really good process for gun registration. Senator Ebke wanted to do away with that. So Senator Schnoor said, well, I'll take this as my priority bill. And so he did, even though it wasn't his particular bill. He picked that as his priority. They took it to the floor. It went through a filibuster, and they lost. And so the bill is dead for this year. So he has burned his priority bill for this year, even though it wasn't his bill.
Okay. So priority means that it definitely is going to get a hearing on the floor.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that's guaranteed. Okay, so you raised that particular bill, and you brought up a term that I think a lot of people would like to hear about. It's like you said, filibuster. So tell us, what is a filibuster? What does it mean? How does it work?
Yeah, well, it's basically a stall tactic, and a bill on general file that you can filibuster the bill up to 8 hours. So you have to have 8 hours of stuff to talk about. Senator Chambers is very good about this, and he actually has kind of schooled and taught the other senators how to filibuster. And he's a very good statesman. He really understands the process and the rules of the legislature. And so he has kind of helped them along learn how to do this. And that's why in this session we've had quite a few filibusters already, just because he's taught them how to do it and they have figured it out. So it's just a process of trying to kill a bill or trying to get some other bill passed by delay.
Okay. All right. Another caller question. Where can I find information on bills introduced in the unicameral?
Again, the legislature's website, nebraskalegislature.gov, wealth of information. Over on the home page, on the upper right hand, there is a little place that says, search for bills. And you just type in the legislative bill number, if you know it, and it'll pop up the bill, it will tell who introduced it, it will give a one-liner about the bill. You can read the entire bill on the website, and you can find out where the bill is. Now, if you don't know what the number of the bill is that you're looking for, there's another spot over on the left-hand side that talks about keywords. So you can search bills, then go keyword, and if you're looking for urban stormwater, then you type in those keywords, and all of the bills that have been introduced that have to do with urban stormwater will pop up, and then you can read the one-liners and figure out if that's the bill that you're looking for.
Okay, so our legislature makes it really easy for citizens or anyone to...
It's an excellent website, has just a ton of information. It's very, very user-friendly too.
Okay. Now, if there's a bill that, I guess you would have to keep going back to check the progress, but there is another, something else. Someone asked, what's Bill Tracker?
Yeah, well, Bill Tracker it's a easy way to kind of keep track of, say, if you're interested in 5 or 6 bills, and you just kind of want to keep track of those 5 or 6 bills, then you can register on Bill Tracker. You can actually watch up to 15 bills for free, and then they have a premium level beyond that. But you register, and it will, every time something happens to this bill, like if it's heard in committee, you'll get an email that said, today the bill was heard in committee. If it made it out onto the floor, general file, it will say, today this bill made it out to the general file. So you can keep up with those bills, and they will actually contact you when something happens, there's some sort of a change in that bill.
Okay, so another really good thing for citizens to know about being able to follow what's going on in the legislature.
And it's very easy.
Okay, and anyone can go down and listen to the hearings on the floor and in committee? Are they all open?
Absolutely, yes. That's why they call them public hearings, because they definitely are all open to the public. Children have come down and testified on bills that concerning, maybe education or school issues or things like that, things that concern the children. So, I mean, you don't have to be a citizen. You don't even have to be a resident of Nebraska in order to come down and testify.
So anyone can. Do you have to sign in and?
Yes, if you're going, and each committee has their own rules about this, but in general, if you're going to be speaking on a bill, then they do have a sign-in sheet, and you sign whether you're supporting, opposing, or you're neutral on the bill. You sign your name, the bill number, and if you're representing somebody, then you sign that too. So if you're lobbying for somebody, you sign that. Otherwise, you're just representing yourself, and then you hand that sheet in when you give your testimony.
And is there a time limit? Is it best to have it written out so that you meet a certain time requirement, or?
In general, the committees allow either 3 to 5 minutes. That's about 5 minutes is pretty much the most you're going to get to speak your piece. So the best thing to do, of course, obviously, is keep your testimony very short, to the point, very factual. This is why I support this bill. And then if you have other things that you want to add, then you can have written statements too. So when you get up to testify, you can hand your written statements to the pages, and they'll pass that out to the senators. So that kind of gives you a little bit more time, and a little bit more input besides the oral time that you'll have.
Okay, so if you have something like some fact sheet or a graph or something like that, you could put that on paper and have that turned into them. Okay.
And they generally want about 10 copies so that they have enough for the whole committee. Okay,
great. That's good to know. Another question. This is a league question. How do I find out more about the League of Women Voters?
The League of Women Voters, omahalwv.org.
Yes.
That's the website. The telephone number is 402-344-3701.
And email address? So it's,
you'll help me out with that
one.
All
right, omahalwv@gmail.com.
There we go.
There we are. Okay. This is a good question. Can men join the League of Women Voters?
Absolutely. Since 1972. The League of Women Voters formed in 1920. It took us 52 years to get over it. But we, since 1972, absolutely we have allowed men to join. And in fact, we've had men on our board of directors. Our natural resources director just recently was of the male gender. And on the state league as well, we have had
Our social
men
policy
serve.
chair is,
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
So, yeah, we need everybody's voice. So we're glad to have them. We welcome them.
And anyone can join, have to be 18 of voting age, right?
Yes.
To join. So,
yes.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's see. Another question that's come in. If the legislature does not hear bills tomorrow due to the weather, which they won't because they are closed, do they just lose a day or add another day to the session? Good question. Do they just take do they look up snow days?
They do not get snow days.
Okay.
No. So you know, when it ends, it ends. They will reset the hearing, and they will. You know, you'll be able to find out when the hearing is reset.
Okay.
Sometimes if they're really in a crunch for time, most of those hearings start at 1:30 in the afternoon. If they're in a real time crunch, sometimes they'll reset the hearing for like noon, because every day they recess from noon to 1:30, and if they have to squeeze some extra hearings in, they'll do it then.
Okay.
But more than likely they'll do another.
So
1:30.
April 20th is the end date, and there's no mechanism for extending a session?
You know,
Or
there is, but it has to be like really extenuating circumstances.
Okay.
They really try to keep it to those 60 days.
Okay. And who would make that decision?
The speaker would make the decision,
okay.
yeah.
So pretty powerful position there.
Yes, yes he is. And he's
Okay.
doing a good job. So.
Good. Okay. Well, let's talk again about some more legislation. I know one bill in particular that people are very interested in is the one on expanding Medicaid again. A new bill was introduced this session, so do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, this is the third year, I believe, if I'm keeping track long enough, that the attempt has been made. The issue is there is a hole. There's people who don't make enough money to be able to be on the Affordable Care Act and get subsidies. And they make too much money to be able to be on regular Medicaid. Medicaid is very stringent, very strict in Nebraska. So, and there's about 77,000 of those people in Nebraska, and most of them are working poor. They're working hard at probably 3 or 4 jobs, and yet they're not making enough money to enable them to get health care benefits. So this is the third time around. The bill changes a little bit from year to year, and the idea is to get those people onto some sort of health care plan. And this time, Senator McAllister has introduced a bill, and he's trying to make it such that the chambers of commerce and the other business people buy into it, because they have a very powerful lobby, and he's trying to get their support for this bill. The governor does not support any kind of Medicaid expansion, which is very unfortunate, because basically what we're doing is we are handing our money over to the federal government and not getting anything in return. We could be getting about, I think it's like $4 million coming back to us if we would just help these people to get health insurance.
And now this particular version of the bill this year, I understand it's a little bit different. It's allowing for using those federal dollars to expand Medicaid to actually purchase insurance in the private market.
Yes.
So that's modeled after another state did it that way?
I think, I know several states have tried something like this. I think Arkansas has tried for one.
Okay.
It's okay. I don't think it's really as good as simply, across the board doing Medicaid expansion, but at least it gives these folks some help.
Okay, but Nebraska would still have to get a waiver from the federal government to institute this kind of plan?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. And as far as expansion, it seems like there's still a lot of information coming in, studies being done, that it really does help people with coverage gap.
Yes.
It's helping hospitals cover uncompensated care. I just saw a study today that Indiana, that just expanded Medicaid last year in February, that had a year of experience, and all their hospitals are showing their costs for uncompensated care have gone way down.
Absolutely.
More people covered.
And particularly in rural hospitals, and Nebraska is pretty much a rural state. with just a couple of urban areas. And so it really, really helps those rural hospitals to stay afloat and to stay open, which helps the economy, which helps the rural areas, which gives better health care to our citizens. So there's truly no downside except for a political lack of will.
Okay. Now, has anybody chosen this as a priority? Is this bill going to get a hearing on the floor?
It hasn't even had a public hearing yet, and I don't know if it will be a priority or not. Okay. Senator Campbell carried that bill the first 2 years and really pushed it. Yes. This is the first time for Senator McCollister, and Senator Campbell has a different priority bill this year.
Okay. Well, here's a question related to Medicaid expansion. Will we have to change governors in order to get Medicaid expansion, or is there any other way to make it happen?
Oh, gosh. The League of Women Voters does not endorse or oppose political candidates. So.
Now, what we can say is if, for example, the bill got a hearing on the floor and passed, the governor might veto it, but there is a way around that.
Yes.
So what would happen
override,
there?
And it would take 30 votes of the legislature to override the governor's veto. And, in general, my observation of the senators is they're very supportive of some type of Medicaid expansion. They've worked on this now. Again, this is their third year, too. Mm-hmm. So they know this issue, and they know how beneficial it is for Nebraskans. So I'm hoping that something can move forward this year.
Okay, and we have a lot of other groups that we're working with, like Nebraska Appleseed and to
and the Hospital Association, the Nebraska Medical Association. I mean, everybody's on board.
Okay. So hopefully this time with a little change in the way it's structured, and if the business community is behind it, maybe this will maybe it'll get passed. So we'll be advocating for it, though.
Yes, okay. Keep trying.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some other bills in the health area. Are there any mental health issues bills that we're supporting at all, or
the behavioral health issues? Oh, let me see.
Right. Or I guess as we could talk about another one is the Senator Moorfeld's Bill 1097, and that's requiring full payment for sexual assaults forensic testing. Why don't you talk about that one?
Yeah.
It's like, and why hasn't that been happening? Is that we
That's
need
an
a
excellent bill. Well, and here's what happens. If a woman or a man is sexually assaulted and goes to the hospital and seeks medical care, the first thing that they're going to ask you in the hospital is not how are you, but do you have insurance? And even if the woman or the man has health insurance, there are still deductibles and co-pays and things like that. So it still is an expense. If she doesn't have insurance or he doesn't have insurance, then it's even more of an expense. Mm-hmm. And so on top of the trauma of being a victim of a crime, then now you have medical bills coming and people knocking on your door trying to collect. And that just adds to the stress and the trauma. And so what this bill does is say, even if a person has insurance, they never see a bill. All of the bills are paid through an agency that's set up particularly just to take care of these things. And so when a woman or a man comes in and has been sexually assaulted, then everything will be paid for and they will never see a bill.
Okay. And the league is supporting that particular bill.
Absolutely,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Let's talk about the library bill. That should be of interest to people in Omaha.
Yes,
where does that one come from?
I watched the hearing on that today, and it was very interesting to see. Basically, what happens now is in some of the smaller cities in Nebraska, those cities can set up their library board to either be an advisory board or they can be a governing board. And some of the smaller cities, choose one way or the other. And it's a good thing for them because, again, you might have, one or two people working in the library, and it's a very small community, and so there's a reason to have an advisory board. In bigger cities like Omaha and Lincoln, Grand Island, many of the cities of that size, very professional libraries, very well trained librarians. and they operate very professionally, and they have done so for a long, long time. Their budget is set by the city council and the mayor. The mayor in Omaha actually appoints all of the people who sit on the library board. So in that respect, that board is chosen and the budget is chosen through the city. But then beyond that, the board is independent. So they make the selection process for the executive director of the library, they make the selection process for the personnel, they set their policy, they set the administrative rules, they select the books based on professional practices. Mm-hmm. And the mayor of Omaha wants to change that. She wants to have more control over that board. And so that's kind of the infighting that's going on. And it's very unfortunate because listening to the professionals who were speaking today about this bill, they were saying, you know, these fights like this are very few and far between. And if people can just sit down and talk things over, they can get it straightened out. Again, librarians are professionals, they know what they're doing, and it's a different thing than plowing the roads. Because we're talking about intellectual freedom, we're talking about people's being able to think freely, independent of politics, and not having politicians telling them what books they can choose to, what books we can choose to read, and what sort of board policies to set on the library. So it's a whole different animal.
Okay, so have we taken a position on this particular bill, the library bill at all? Or?
We oppose the bill.
We're opposing the bill, okay. So if people want to let their legislator know how they feel about this library bill, basically being for the bill would change how the library board is governed and the budget is directed, the dollars that are budgeted are spent.
Yes.
And if they want to leave things the way they are, then they should call and say, I oppose this bill.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, great. Here's one that's good. Does the league have any priority bills dealing with wind or solar energy? Are there any that have come up with
we don't have
wind or
the Omaha League doesn't, not this session.
Okay.
The one that I can recall just right off the top of my head is Senator Harr's bill. Well, actually there's two. The one that might be of interest to the local folks is the electric power bill. Because as you might recall, just recently we had the issue where OPPD wanted to change their electrical rates so that people who are using less electricity would be charged more, and people who are using more electricity would be charged less, which makes no sense when on two levels. Number one, trying to conserve and save the planet, and then secondly, the people who are least likely to be able to afford electricity are going to be charged more, and those who are more likely to be able to afford it are charged less. And so that's, so what has happened is a bill was introduced that says that before rates can be changed through a public power district, they have to go through the Public Service Commission at the state level, and they have to be approved there. Oh. And then it outlines exactly what things need to be taken a look at. And one of them is the rate schedule and who it affects and whether it's conserving electricity and things like that. So it's a good bill.
Okay, so if this bill passed, then what OPPD is proposing to do would have to be reviewed by the Public Service Commission? Okay,
yes.
Even though they've already taken...
You know, I'm not sure whether that would be retroactive or not.
Okay, but at least in future, any rate increases would have to go through the Public Service Commission. Okay, and so we are supporting that bill, or have we taken a position?
We are supporting that bill. That is one of our priorities, because again, it's a greater Omaha issue, and we're very concerned about working on issues of local concern, and that is definitely one.
Right, exactly. I think we have another question coming in. It's good we're getting calls tonight. Oh, here's one. This is good. LB 1036. This is on payday loan lenders. What's it all about, and does the league support it?
Yes, we do support it. And the issue with payday lending is it is a service that is needed because there are folks who don't bank, or they go from paycheck to paycheck, and then something happens the car breaks down, a child gets sick, and they need, $200 extra that they don't have. And they'll might be able to get it, at their next payday. And so it's short-term lending that's outside of the regular banking system, and it's a service that is needed, but it's a service that's also abusive. And the rates are somewhere around 435% per year. So what this bill is doing is it's not doing away with payday lending, but bringing it under some sort of regulations and controls, and there will be a ceiling of what the percentage rates they can charge. They need to disclose exactly what's happening, and if you don't pay your loan, this is what's going to happen, so that people understand up front what they're getting into when they take out one of these loans, and they're not gouged percentage-wise.
Okay, and so we're supporting this particular
Absolutely.
Bill. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And what I'm hearing you say too is that it's requiring some simple language so that people
Yes.
understand what they're getting into when they're
Yes.
getting a loan for that amount of money.
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, the payday lenders are opposing that, and they're saying we're trying to run them out of business, and that's really not true. Again, it is a service that's needed, and people depend on it. And if they didn't have that, they wouldn't have that $200 to repair the car, and then they'd lose their job, and then that would,
Right.
it would just snowball.
So we're talking about reasonable
Yes.
regulation
Yes.
and oversight.
Absolutely.
It's an industry that hasn't had a lot in some states.
Right.
Okay. All right. That's a good one to know. How about under juvenile justice? Let's talk about some of the bills there. There's one on detention standards for juveniles. Want to talk about that one? Are we
Yes.
supporting
Well,
that?
as I said before, in 1988, excuse me, is when I started working on juvenile justice issues in Douglas County, and it hasn't changed. I mean, seriously, the detention standards that they use now are pretty much the same that they used back in the bad old days, and national standards have come along through the years and have really improved. And yet we're still using old standards, and so this finally brings us into compliance with national standards. One of the things that, among many, that it says is that you can't use detention for punishment.
Okay.
One of the differences between juvenile court and adult court is juvenile court, there's no bail. So you can't bail out of detention, and therefore you have to be really careful when you use it, because a kid that's truant can be held without bail, just like an adult would be held for murder without bail. So you have to be very careful, and you should really limit detention. Well, it's been used and abused for many years in Douglas County, so this is a very good bill that finally says we're not going to do that anymore.
Now, is solitary confinement a component of the detention at all, or does that come into play at all?
It can be. It
Okay.
can be.
So does this bill address
There's
that?
another bill, there's a companion bill that addresses solitary confinement for juveniles, yes.
Okay, so we're supporting both of these bills?
Absolutely, yes,
Okay.
yes.
And the second one, I assume, would get rid of solitary confinement for
Yes,
juveniles.
and then another one that's a really good one too is that requires that juveniles will have counsel, will have legal counsel immediately. So once they go into the process, they will receive legal counsel regardless of ability to pay. Because
Okay.
right now what they do is say, well, can your parents pay, or can your uncle pay, or and all that does is slow down the justice process. So the new way of doing it will make sure that these children have legal counsel right away.
Okay, which would be true for an adult, so we're talking
Absolutely.
equal protection for
Yes,
ages.
yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, here's a good one that's very timely, since tonight is the first night of presidential politics and the caucuses in Iowa.
Yeah.
Could you explain the difference between a caucus and a primary, since the Democrats have one and the Republicans have the other?
Oh,
in
do
the
I
state?
have to do that? What does that have to do with the unicam?
I know. I guess we could just talk just in general that the primary election, and
Yeah.
if we're talking Nebraska, the primary election's May 10th on the ballot.
Yeah.
But the Democrats on March 5th are caucusing for their presidential candidates, and they can choose to do it that way, like they do it, like they're doing in Iowa tonight. Both parties are actually caucusing, and you actually have a group of people that comes together and they decide which candidates they're supporting, and they get together with their little groups, and then they take a tally of who won the most votes, and that's how it's decided for Nebraska.
I know. I've actually been to one caucus, and it's kind of a, I don't know, it's kind of a goofy process, because again, you start over on this side, and then these people start over on this side, and then you have spokespeople who come and say, well, my candidate is great because whatever. And so then you kind of shuffle, the chairs around again, and some people will come, well, okay, well then I like your candidate more, and well, I wanted to be one of those spokespeople because I had better ideas for why my candidate was good, than the spokesperson did. But they pick, they pick these spokespersons, and so it kind of depends on how good your person is who's speaking as to whether or not they sell the idea of the candidate.
So it's a mini speech that's trying to persuade. And
it takes a lot of time too. That's why it's so hard to get people to come to caucus, because it can take hours to do. It's fun. And it's
a lot of
energizing
on a personal level with people too, just chatting about politics in general, and besides the candidates and issues.
And I actually, Senator, or she's not senator anymore, Amanda McGill, who used to be a state senator, and she's now working for Brad Ashford. I actually met her mother at this caucus. We were just sitting there and talking, and she said, well, my daughter is a state senator. Anyway, aside.
Okay. All right, let's get back to some more bills that are in the unicameral then. Under the area of civil liberties, there's a couple of them there. Well, the library board one was one. Right. But the other one is about First Amendment protection for university student journalists. Why don't you talk about that one?
Yes.
We're supporting that.
Yes. And this actually kind of goes back to 1988 again. In 1988, there was a Supreme Court case called Hazelwood that passed and basically said that student journalists at the high school level didn't have the full First Amendment protections, that their administrators could censor them, teachers could censor them, and what happened after that was then it kind of became also a university issue. There was another case called the Hosty case, and it kind of raised that to the university level, saying, well, university students who are adults still don't have the First Amendment protections or free press protections that a regular press would have. So what has happened in Nebraska, there's two small schools, Wayne State and Chadron State, and they're having some issues with some of their professors who were tenured professors who have been fired, and nobody can find out any information, and the administrators will not share any information with the student press. So they're not able to get the information, and the press is being controlled by the administrators. And so some of the faculty have come to the legislature and said, we really need to support free press because we're not going to find out what's really going on. And when these kids get into the real world, they won't understand that the government is not supposed to be telling them what they can and cannot print. So it's an educational issue as well as a civil rights issue.
Okay, so the league is definitely supporting those First Amendment rights for college journalists. Okay,
absolutely.
Great. There are a few bills that are under judiciary. Let's talk about the one that's about election of judges and eliminating the merit plan.
Oh my.
And of course we do our League of Women Voters Voters Guide every fall, which for the election we will be doing that this year again.
Yes.
And people always have questions about election for retention of judges. So how does that fit into all this?
That's a tough issue. Deciding how to choose judges is a tough issue. We definitely don't want elections because justice shouldn't be a popularity contest, because there are legal issues that are not popular, but they're still right and the right thing to do. So the way that judges are chosen in Nebraska is we have a judicial nominating committee, and it's of both political parties. So they come together, and the attorneys who want to be a judge will throw their name in the pile with their resumes, and then this nominating committee will select out of all of those who are interested in the judgeship. They'll pick 3.
Okay.
And then they take those 3 to the governor, and then of those 3, the governor will pick 1. And so they're appointed. So that's how they start out. And then after that, every 5 years, they're up for what's called retention. So you're voting them in or voting them out.
Okay.
And so that's the process that works in Nebraska. And there's probably some issues with it, but it seems to be the best process for protecting the judiciary.
Okay. So this bill would take you wouldn't be
Yeah.
appointing judges anymore.
No,
They
you'd
would
be
be elected.
electing
They'd be
them.
running for office, essentially.
Yes.
Okay.
Just like,
Which some states do.
yes. And it's not working very well.
Okay. So the league is definitely opposing that one.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then there's another, there's a bill, LB 1000, that's requiring the adoption of standards and policies for use of police body cameras. How has that become an issue in that particular bill?
It's a good bill because it's proactive. It's saying before something happens here in Nebraska, as has happened in other states, we need to figure out policies and procedures so that every law enforcement agency in Nebraska is on the same page as far as how they're going to use body cameras and when and what circumstances. It's just for uniformed officers only, so if you are a non-uniformed officer, this wouldn't apply to you. But it's setting up really good standards and procedures, so it'll be a good bill.
Okay, and we're
It's a good
supporting
idea.
that one as
Absolutely.
well. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
And then the last one in that particular area of judiciary is one that's LB 1055, and that's about secrecy in the grand jury process where a person's killed during a police pursuit or police custody. Do you want to talk about that one a little bit?
Yes, and throughout the country lately in the last year or two, we've had a lot of things come up where a grand jury is secret, nobody knows what happens, and then they come out and they say, well, and this again in a pursuit like this where somebody is killed, they'll come out and they say, well, we're not going to indict anybody, but nobody knows why or why not. So the secrecy just makes it harder for people to move on or to feel like they have had justice. Senator Chambers, years ago, actually introduced the legislation that's on the books now that has to do with a grand jury, saying that every time that somebody is killed, whether they're in custody or they're being pursued, there has to be a grand jury process. So he was the one that actually brought that bill years and years ago.
Okay.
And now he has taken a look at it and says, you know what, we need to open this up to the public. And I think everybody can see why. Just, making the process transparent makes everybody at ease, so that they don't question what's going on behind the scenes.
Okay, and so we're supporting that particular bill.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, another question from our callers, and we're really glad that people are calling in. Please keep calling in with your questions. We're getting some really good ones here. Can you explain LB 966, the Refugee Resettlement Act, and does the League support it?
Oh my, that's a terrible bill.
Okay, tell us why. We're not supporting it, I guess.
Some bills have just lovely names, the Refugee Resettlement Act, but they're pretty bad bills.
Okay, explain this one.
Yes, what this says is that if you are a nonprofit or any sort of a service agency and you're helping refugees in Nebraska, you're helping them to settle, you're helping them to find homes, you're helping them to set up their business or find education, just helping them to fit into our Nebraska life. If one of those folks that has come to you commits a crime, then you're responsible financially and legally, and it was like a $10,000 fine or something like that. You have nothing whatsoever to do with the fact that some adult goes and commits a crime, and it hasn't even happened. It's just a figment of somebody's imagination, and it's very disrespectful, and it's also probably very unconstitutional. So definitely we oppose that bill.
Okay. And has that had a hearing yet in committee, or is
No,
that?
it hasn't. It will be a very
Okay.
interesting hearing, though, when
When it does
happens.
come up, and
Yes.
there'll be a lot of
because
people
there's
testifying.
so many nonprofits that will
Will be affected
really
by that.
object.
Okay, so
to
is
that
the
bill.
League taking a position on this bill, or are we? or have we not?
I think we have taken a position. It's not one of our priority bills,
Okay.
but we have taken a
But we'll
position
testify.
in opposition
Okay,
to the
all
bill.
right.
Sure.
Okay, here's a good one too. Can anyone come and testify in the unicameral? How and why would I want to? I think we touched on it a little
Yes.
bit, but
Yes, yes, you can. You can have your 3 minutes of fame. Nebraska is a big state, 500 miles wide, and some folks live so far away. And you drive to the legislature and you only get 3 minutes to say your piece on a bill. It's like, why in the world should I do that? For one thing, if you have the passion for the issue, definitely the 3 minutes of fame is worth it. And again, it's there, it's there forever. It's transcribed and archived, and what you say will be on record forever. The other thing is, besides that 3 minutes of testimony, then you can kind of go around to the legislature and you can meet the other senators and you can also speak your piece, talk to them, talk to their legislative aides. So you can take more time than that 3 minutes. But that's the beauty of the legislature, is that anybody can come and talk about anything, whether they support it or they oppose it. And there's no limit, so it works great. Sometimes you get some real characters, but that's okay, because that's
all voices should be heard.
Absolutely, that's what democracy is about.
Okay. Well, we're actually getting pretty close to the end of our show here, but real quickly, any other bills? Real quickly, natural resources, that the bill 1070 requiring liability insurance for wastewater injection. Can you talk? We're supporting that one, so talk briefly about that before we have to end here.
Yeah, and of course, the league has opposed the Keystone XL pipeline, and we're concerned about fracking. We're concerned about pumping wastewater into our water supply in Nebraska. So what this bill, this is Senator Harr's bill, Senator Ken Harr, and he's been very supportive of environmental issues like this. And what the bill does is it requires like a $10 million fine or liability insurance if you're going to pump any wastewater, if you're going to inject any wastewater into Nebraska anywhere. But then it also sets a limit so that you can't pump that wastewater into our aquifer. Places where our aquifer is, maybe 2 feet below the surface, it won't allow it at all. So it's a very good bill. I'm sure we'll have some very powerful lobbyists who will be lobbying against this bill. But definitely the League of Women Voters supports that legislation.
And this is the kind of thing where we're talking about fracking, which has caused earthquakes in Oklahoma and other places. So should be of interest and importance to people. And
what has happened so far is it's not even Nebraska companies that are injecting this wastewater, it's Colorado companies that, because they don't want to do it in Colorado, they want to borrow Nebraska to pump their wastewater into Nebraska.
And that's been allowed all these years?
So far.
So far, okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, Peggy, thank you so much for being with us.
Welcome.
Is there anything else real quickly, you just have a few seconds, that you'd want to add about the unicameral and being working for the league there?
Well, again, the website is fantastic, and I would really just urge anybody to go to nebraskalegislature.gov. Very user-friendly. If you have any questions, you can find the answer on that website. If you don't know who your senator is, definitely check that out. It's a terrific website.
Great, thank you. We're out of time. The hour's gone by very quickly. For the League of Women Voters, I'm Geri Simon, reminding you, inform yourself about the issues, talk to others about them, and when election time rolls around, go vote, Omaha.